Yeah, and you mentioned in passing in the book about Paul Allen and A Small World, which is a whole other can of worms. Just
Yeah, the social
crazy.
network
Yeah.
that was like owned by I think Harvey Weinstein and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy
Hmm.
stuff. Again, so many different things. So now that we've spent the better part of an hour just picking at the surface of some of these connections and hopefully giving people an idea of how much material is contained in this book, but not really, because you won't get it until you get the 900 pages. And now that we've done that, now in a sentence or two, summarize for us, who was Jeffrey Epstein? Who was he working for? What was he doing?
Okay, Jeffrey Epstein was as much a financial criminal as a sex criminal. There's a very particular reason why mainstream media only wants to talk about his sex crimes between 2000 and 2006. Jeffrey Epstein was also not an anomaly in the network in which he operated. Numerous people engaged in sex blackmail and sex trafficking. If you think these issues died with Jeffrey Epstein, you were sorely mistaken. But one of the reasons Jeffrey Epstein is really important is because a lot of the situation in which we find ourselves, whether it's impending economic collapse, transhumanism, all sorts of this stuff, he had his hands in those pies and a lot more. And if you were to pull on the Epstein thread, I guess you could say, you start to unravel a lot of the bigger picture, and a lot of what is going on right now has its origins decades ago. And basically, the people running the show here and that were, that Epstein was fronting for, it's intelligence and organized crime, but it's a symbiosis of those two entities that has become so interconnected. They are one and the same, and these are basically the people that are running most governments in the world today.
And
The same people do the same crimes, have the same rackets, decade over decade over decade over decade, and there's continuity between the crimes of the CIA and the mob and all that stuff of yesteryear, basically to now, and that it hasn't stopped. And this idea that organized crime disappeared and like sexual blackmail, that's not a thing in the US. It's been a thing since like the 40s and the 50s, and it's never really stopped. And our government clearly does not operate the way we are told it is. And, there's basically the conversation that needs to be had after reading this book is the government, the CIA, all of these people here and their networks need to be investigated, but the government isn't capable of investigating itself. So what do we do, right? What do you do in that situation?
that is the question, isn't it?
But organized crime is in charge.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what we're dealing with here, and that's why I thought it was important to go back to sort of the origins of the CIA and how this all sort of
Exactly.
started, because you see from the very beginning who was really behind the OSS and the CIA and
Yes,
all
the
of that.
intelligence
And
agencies are organized crime. They're just the most
yeah.
organized of the organized crime, perhaps.